You've got high performance piston aircraft, single engine piston aircraft coming in hot. You also have situations where half the runway is fine and the other half might be poor to nil braking action, especially up in the Northeast in the winter time. So it's not just a ROAS system.
Hello and welcome to Aviation News Talk for a Newsmakers edition, where we talk with people who are making the news. I'm Max Truscott. You just heard Jason Bialek of Honeywell Aerospace talking about ROAS, or Runway Overrun Awareness and Alerting System, which is just one of the features of the new Anthem glass cockpit that Honeywell announced a few weeks ago. Now, Honeywell Aerospace is best known for its Primus glass cockpits used primarily in business jets and turboprops, but Jason tells us the new Anthem is targeted for use in both jets and single-engine piston aircraft, so you'll want to stick around to hear how Honeywell is doing glass cockpits differently. Now, last week in episode 208, we talked with Dr. Catherine Cavagnaro about 36 things that will help you fly more professionally and increase the odds you'll pass your private and commercial check rides. So if you missed that episode, you may want to check it out at aviationnewstalk.com/208. Also this week, I videotaped our conversation with Jason and included videos and still images of the Honeywell Anthem glass cockpit. If you'd like to see that and the many other bonus videos I post for members, just sign up at the $20 a month or higher level at aviationnewstalk.com/awesome, because this is a listener-supported show and you are all awesome listeners. And if the Aviation News Talk podcast is new to you, in whatever app you're listening to us now, just click on the subscribe button or the follow button in the Apple Podcast app, so new episodes will download for free each week. I think you'll enjoy learning about Anthem and you won't want to miss future shows. Now let me tell you a little bit about Jason Bialek. Jason is the product line director at Honeywell for the Anthem General Aviation UAM and eVTOL integrated flight decks. He formerly worked at Boeing for 10 years and worked prior to that as a corporate pilot. He has both a law degree and an aerospace engineering degree. And now here's our conversation with Jason Bialek. Well, Jason, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today.
Great to be here.
Well, you're at Honeywell, and a lot of folks in the audience may not be familiar with all the different kinds of glass cockpits you have and the different aircraft that they serve. Give us a little background about that so people can figure out, as we talk later about Anthem, where that fits into the product line.
Sure. Well, the most popular aircraft we're on today are the PC-12, PC-24, the Falcon series of aircraft, all the Falcons, all the Gulfstreams, except the G280 as of today. And we are also in the Viking Twin Otter and Sea Star and the AW-139 helicopter, which is a really, really nice machine.
Okay. So basically a lot of business jets, some turboprops, not Cessna 172s.
Well, the BK product line, of course, has been on that. And so Anthem is a Honeywell cockpit. And we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about how we're doing that. But essentially, we're taking the very powerful and capable systems and using the evolution of technology the last 10 years to make that available in virtually all aircraft, including very difficult to serve urban air mobility, which drives a very small and lightweight requirement.
Interesting. So BK, of course, is Bendix King, and I know that was standard equipment in the Cessna pistons from 1997 through about 2003 or thereabouts. You're saying that if we kind of look at this from the 30,000-foot view, Anthem is going to be so modular that you're going to be able to push some of its features and capabilities down to single-engine piston someday?
That's correct. Yes, so we're really excited about it. It's Distributive Processing Module is what it's called, which simply means that we have the processing capable of being put in multiple units throughout the aircraft. It doesn't take anywhere near as much as what avionics in general across all the companies that we're shipping avionics, and the big three, of course. It's not anywhere near as demanding with respect to volume requirements and weight requirements for the performance anymore.
Got it. Okay, so you're saying that some of the big benefits are it's smaller and lighter, and of course that translates into fuel savings?
Absolutely, and more importantly, it allows us to take these advanced features that used to be reserved for just a few thousand pilots and make them available for all of us.
That's great. So what you're telling me is, hey, all those great features that people flying business jets have been using in the past, you can actually have those available someday in your single-engine piston?
Yes.
And that's kind of what happened with glass cockpits. We saw those start in the higher end aircraft, and then eventually they made their way down to the lower end aircraft as well too. Well, let's go ahead and dive in and talk a little bit about the features. Maybe a good way to start is just kind of imagine you and I are co-piloting and piloting a jet, and we're in the hotel, and we've got 3 or 4 legs coming up today. What kinds of things would we be doing to get started for the day?
Well, one of the things I'm most excited about with Anthem is we're always on cloud connected, which means that it's not how you would think of it as in the internet is connected to the avionics and to critical systems. That's not what we're saying. Instead, what we're getting is flight planning, setting up the windows or the layouts in the cockpit, the clutter or declutter on the maps, all of the typical things that we take time in the aircraft to accomplish. Even if we have presets to do that, we now can do off-board. How we do that is through the cloud, through Honeywell Forge. We basically take things like Mission Manager, where we're setting up our timeline through the mission, our windows layouts, whether we have a chart to the right of the PFD, a taxi diagram for taxi out as an example, a standard instrument departure chart. Those types of things typically take time while we're in the airplane. Instead, we now do it off the airplane at the hotel. Save it to the cloud, and then when we power up the avionics, all of those things are ready for us. So we're left basically with just doing the physical walk around and powering up the avionics and running our checklists.
Okay, so let's imagine we've gotten to the airport and we've done our walk around and we've climbed on board. Sounds like the time from hitting the go button to the time to start taxiing is shortened dramatically. What else are we going to notice as we get started on our flight?
A couple of things. Honeywell's strength is human factors. So if you look at some of the higher end jets, really clean displays, great fonts, great colors, very comfortable. We use color judiciously, so we're not splashing color everywhere. That was something that we learned along the way with some of our key customers, where color, especially in night environments and things like that, cannot always be that helpful contrast. You're smiling, so I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. And just to carry that point a little bit further, I've been in many cockpits where things are just too bright at night. You've got MFDs, which look like colored TVs. And it's like, no. I want a dark cockpit. I just want to, see the important stuff. I don't want to, have my night vision destroyed by this bright object in the cockpit.
That's correct. So we also are very focused on simplicity and less clutter. So with 3D waypoints in traffic as an example, very simple presentation, easy to understand. We don't have a bunch of lines or rectangles kind of coming at you, filling the display. So that's what you're going to notice the most. Is it's just a very comfortable, easy to interpret display. In addition, the menus are more like consumer devices. So if you're used to the symbology that you use on your iPad or your phone or the gestures and things like that, obviously within the bounds of cert requirements, you'll be very comfortable. I had we do this intentionally. We bring people in without pilot ratings. We try to get them to navigate through various tasks without any training. And I was pretty impressed. I have a video I keep on my phone to show my kids and others at work to, hey, this is how, when you get human factors folks involved up front and you intentionally keep it simple, this is how powerful you can make interfaces where people don't need to spend a lot of extra time training.
Well, certainly anything that's easier to use is got to be a huge advantage. I think those of us who've been using GPS for, 20 plus years know that what used to be simpler cockpits suddenly got more complicated. So anything that simplifies that is huge.
Absolutely. So another question we get is, how do you keep it simple through the higher end business jets? This is a very wide range of market needs that you're serving. And the way we explain that is keep it simple when you can keep it simple and then add layers. So as an example, if you're a VFR pilot and all you want to do is hop in an Anthem cockpit and go, you absolutely can do that. So you would have done your 4-flight plan, maybe do your briefing, which we're now allowed to do legally on 4-flight before you get to the airplane. Put your destination in just like you're used to doing in a lot of the lower cost GPS navigators. And that's it. Run your checklist. We'll have a very nice electronic checklist. You can see that in some of the videos out there. And you're off and running. So we don't require the G650 FMS pre-flight kind of a thing to take a VFR flight from Colorado Springs to Aspen or something.
You were talking about using gestures that people might use on a smartphone. Are you using touch screens, or do you have cursor input devices? How do people interact with the system?
Both. It depends on the system. So if you're a very low cost Cessna type installation, then you may not need a cursor control device. But in that type of an environment, we have hand stabilization all around the displays and even in between the two displays. And you also have, and Cirrus learned this, I don't want to get into theirs, but they've got a lot of feedback from the Cirrus Jet, which doesn't have anything more than a simple checklist controller. And it works really, really well. So they use the essentially preset, different screens like radios, your display management, and checklist, et cetera. And you basically leave that in place. And even in moderate turbulence, the all-touch environment works pretty well. But for the higher end cockpits, we will have a low cost and effective, simple cursor control device. And basically anything that you are able to do via touch in the cockpit, you'll be able to do with the CCD.
So you were talking about touchscreens and turbulence. Are you saying, in essence, you've got a place to rest your fingers so that your hand just doesn't go flying around in turbulence?
Absolutely. So we have we talked a little bit about the scale. Some of the cockpits will just have one display and what we call a PIDU, which is a 9-inch, almost tablet type interface unit. Others will have two of those. Some might have two of the 13 3-inch screens. Some might have two 14 6-inch screens, and others may have the bigger 15-inch screens. So when you have all of those together, even if you don't have the cursor control device, generally speaking, your hand is able to reach virtually the entire height of the screen. So coming up from the bottom, you can reach up to about the middle of the screen, stabilize no problem. And then we also have stabilization on the side of the screens. We work that with the OEMs. The reason we did that versus building it into the bezels of the displays is to allow us to build a single piece of glass like look, which is really helpful both for us as pilots because we have a lot more display real estate we can use. There's more glass, less bezel. So the charts look better, the SVS looks better, the maps look better. And because we wanted the OEMs to be able to do their styling within their cockpit. Every OEM has a little bit different feel they want to bring to the cockpit.
And I'm guessing that the OEMs, the aircraft manufacturers, they can basically work with you to figure out how many displays do we have, how many modules do we have, which software features are we going to include, and so on. Is it customizable in that sense?
Absolutely. That's part of the meeting multiple market segments requirements. So we expect some of the safety features will be part of the standard offering that's worked with each of the manufacturers. That's pretty standard today for avionics. You decide what you want to include in the standard ship set, and then you decide what customers are going to end up buying after the fact. But we intend to allow even the small aircraft and the UAMs to pick from that menu of advanced features. So for the less capable systems, you may not have all 15 or 20 features like you might in a Gulfstream, but you'll be able to select some of the more important features like taxi assist, like 3D ROAS and others, landing assist, emergency huddle land, you name it.
Well, tell us about the mission manager. That's a new concept which sounded pretty powerful.
It is pretty powerful. One of my favorite stories from our feedback, our non-Honeywell pilots, we have this advisor group we call Whiskey 10 Aviators. It has nothing to do with the whiskey, Tennessee whiskey or anything. It's actually a really cool airport up in Washington where you get a great cup of coffee. And so anyway, Whiskey 10 Aviators came in and they started looking at the mission manager and they said, you know what, you guys, this is really cool. You get to do things like tie in with safety management systems, trigger starting videos and taking snapshots for your automatic journey logs. And most importantly, have a simple time-based view of what's next. So your single click access to checklists, to charts, to your radios in a sequential, simple time-based view. There's some pictures of the interface out on our web, which we'll give you the address at the end here. And so what they said was, but you missed I was a little bit shocked because I'm an instructor, you're an instructor. That's how we run our lessons by time. Okay, next we're going to do the stall series. Next we're going to do the steep turns, etc. He said, "Why not put the training events in the timeline?" I said, "That's a great idea. We should do that, and you can." So we're offering essentially a way for you to easily queue up what's next, both with respect to the automatic what's next, the checklist, the charts, the radios, and also with respect to the pilot configured what's next. So I mentioned what we get to do in the hotel now, which is use a remote version of Mission Manager. You can set that up ahead of time before you even get to the aircraft, and you've got your mission planned out. You can also set triggers for sending a fuel order to the FBO, like, signature, hey, we need 50 gallons, or depending on the airplane you're flying, we need 10,000 pounds. And then you can also text passengers ETA. That's all powered by that always on cloud connected. So when you fly past a particular waypoint, it sends that automatically. You don't have to worry about whether you remembered to do it.
When I looked at the Mission Manager, I was struck by how, for example, if you were getting close to your destination, flying an approach, that essentially from the Mission Manager, you could then select the tower frequency. You didn't have to go over to the radio section.
That's correct. So one of the benefits of Anthem actually is the Windows layout management. So even though you get to do that off board, so you don't have to spend any of that time in the cockpit, you're an instructor. So sometimes we're there 15 minutes before we're cranking, depending on the student we're working with. We now can not only set up those windows where we want, including the Mission Manager window, so you don't have to have that radio page up full time, but also with Mission Manager, you can have a huge SVS in your PFD, beautiful, huge MFD, and then just work out of that Mission Manager by just hitting what's next, both your checklist and your approach chart and your radio. Makes it very clean. So one of the stories behind the scenes on Anthem is we wanted the cockpit to work like a mentor pilot or an instructor. We wanted it to work with you, not against you. And what we meant by that was we wanted these things to be coming up into view at the right time. And more importantly, we didn't want you to have to think about where things were at. We didn't want you to have to think about, okay, I put that away, now I got to bring it back. All right. I was on that page. Gosh, where is that page again? All the things that we tend to struggle with in today's avionics. You
mentioned SVS. Tell us a little bit about your synthetic vision system.
So Honeywell's synthetic vision system is, I'm a little biased on this, I will admit, but it's the best on the market. And the reason I say that is because we spent a lot of time on the symbology, the grid lines, the texture, the way the airport environment is represented. It's conformal, which means anytime you see any runway end or a traffic target or a 3D waypoint with range rings visible in the SVS, when you're looking at that angle, that whether it's 5-10 degrees to the right or 5 or 10 degrees low, that it's correct, it's conformal. In addition to that, it works together well with our flight director symbology. We have an energy-based flight director queue, flight path guidance queue, and that's just, a lot of your listeners are familiar with the FPVs on a number of the other avionics providers' products. We have a track-based synthetic vision. And the reason that's important is when you're in a crosswind, that FPV stays in front of you, the runway environment stays in front of you, you still have visibility to where your nose is relative to where you're headed. So you're not having to deal with, am I crab to the left or crab to the right? But it keeps that FPV from bouncing off of the speed or the altitude tapes. Very, very important. We do offer the ability to switch into heading-based SVS. That's especially important for helicopters, and consistency with HUD on some of our platforms. Heads-up display. Sorry, I got to stop throwing out these acronyms. But when I really hope you get a chance to come out and fly with us in Deer Valley, so you can see it firsthand. It's just an amazing synthetic vision.
Super. Sounds like a great invitation. I'll try to do that. Talk a little bit about what we can do in flight in terms of accessing the internet.
This is really exciting. So cybersecurity is super important, as you know, and so we've done a lot with customers over the last 8 to 10 years in ensuring that we can do this in a way which maintains security. How we do that is this portal, which essentially is an EFB window that you can put on the forward displays. And this is true even in that single display instance where you've got a single display, maybe with a 9-inch pilot interface display unit. That window, an EFB window on the forward displays, allows you to move away from a situation where you've got the iPads on your yoke, or you've got it, in a window location on a mount where it can block traffic. I'm sure you, as like I have, working as an instructor, have had similar concerns. We've had an Alaska incident, as you're aware, where the window post was a factor. And so anything we can do to eliminate loose objects in the cockpit or awkward type installations is helpful. But more importantly, you are now able to, with that connectivity and with that window on the forward displays, bring in third-party applications, so web applications. We, as a team, were trying to think through how we would bring essentially the pilot's lounge with us so that when we walked out to the airplane, we didn't lose access to a lot of these things. Some people will just do that on their iPad with a hotspot and stay at a low altitude. We offer a small form factor SATCOM with enough performance to allow you to do that airborne. But even if you can't do that airborne, as you probably have experienced on ground holds, whether that's in Atlanta, at Peachtree, or in Teterboro in the Northeast, when storms are moving through, even if you can get that EFB window on the forward displays to bring up content, webcams, airport webcams, storms, tracking, etc. NexRad certainly helpful. SXM is certainly helpful. But this allows you to get to a lot more information when you want to do that. Clearly, you're not going to be doing that, having that window up on approach. So we're going to be working with the regulatory agencies to make sure that, a lot like the automotive, you're not going to be staring at this big EFB window with these really cool web cameras while you're taxiing at 20 knots in a busy airport. That would be obviously a bad idea, but we are intending to give a lot more access to information. OEMs and solution providers can also create content for pilots. So you and I and our students and our fellow pilots hopefully will see a much richer ecosystem of solutions providers bringing really cool things into this EFB window.
So it sounds like we can essentially be surfing the web in a somewhat limited, protected way as we're flying along. How do you provide that connectivity? What's the signal that goes back and forth to the airplane to carry that data in real time?
So that's either going to be cell or Wi-Fi if you happen to be on the ramp and you're in a proximity, but generally it'll be cell phone on the ground and small form factor SATCOM in the air. Now we do have services that I think you're probably familiar with. Some of the OEMs have selected these VHF to the ground when we're flying airlines. Oftentimes we're using that instead of SATCOM. Any connectivity of adequate performance would be fine. So really, it comes down to the subscription price. Some of the higher end business jets have 3 to 5 to 7 megabits per second. That can get kind of expensive, especially if you're SATCOM global. But in the US and Canada, we have a lot of options available to us. Europe is a little trickier, but even there, you've got relatively low cost, high performance broadband you can offer.
Let's talk about some of the advanced features that I think GA pilots would love in particular. Tell us a little bit about your engine out guidance.
So the engine out guidance, we were working on before the industry heard about it from a different team here. So we were pretty excited about it. What we saw as an opportunity was instead of just a ring showing where you may impact terrain, we felt based in part on some recent accidents where the controllers were trying to be helpful, giving airplanes different options, and it was causing confusion. In one case, the pilot could have made it, but they started heading in a different direction, and in the end ended up about a half mile short. That happens more often than I would like to see. So the team created a feature which picks the best airport based on a variety of factors. It still gives you the alternate airports, displays the margin of altitude to the airports in question in a very easy to interpret visual way. You can see the airport elevation as well as the altitude you'll be at over the airport. You get the glide ring in the synthetic vision, which is really cool. So you combine that with the runway representation in the SVS, and you can see immediately how much margin you have. So it's a very helpful feature for us. In addition, you have the bug on the departure. which allows you to see where you hit your turn back altitude. And that's not meant to be, set in stone. As you know, as an instructor, it's kind of advisory. If you wanted to use that as a call on the way out, you certainly could. And it's pilot selectable.
So one of the areas that business jets still continue to have accidents is runway overruns. They come in too hot, too fast, too high. Talk about ROAS. It's one of my favorite features, and of course, it's not available in very many aircraft today, but wow, I think it could really be a game changer.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of the general aviation OEMs very interested in this. As you know, it's not limited to business jets. You've got high performance piston aircraft, single engine piston aircraft coming in hot. You also have situations where half the runway is fine and the other half might be poor to nil braking action, especially up in the Northeast in the winter time. So it's not just a ROAS system in that it tells you when you're landing on a runway that's too short, or as you're rolling out, gives you advisory information, increased braking, max brakes, max reverse, and that type of thing. It also, before you even get to that 200 foot above the runway threshold, about to get into your flare, it gives you an alert that you're not going to make this particular landing. It's hard to describe on a podcast, so we'll have to get you out to Deer Valley. But basically, it provides that information real time so that you shouldn't ever end up in a situation where you've touched down fast or long on the runway in the first place. But if you do that, once you're on the ground, you have a very nice deceleration cue displayed on the runway. And that gives you instantaneous visibility to whether you're stopping where you want to stop on that runway. You can also use that as what we call a poor man's brake to vacate. So for many of you listeners, they may not know what brake to vacate is. In the airline transport world, you set your auto brake specifically to exit at a particular high-speed turnoff. In GA, you can do that type of thing without auto brakes with Honeywell's 3D ROAS system. You just simply set the brakes to set that decel cue on the runway at your desired turnoff point and then hold them. So one of the other things we talk about internally within the Anthem team is we want each of the pilots to be either a Jane Bond 007 or a James Bond 007. And so a lot of these features are set up to easily, visually, without a lot of training, allow you to be the smoothest possible pilot.
Wow, that's a great concept. Certainly anything that makes us better pilots and produce better landings is a good thing. So tell us about the landing assist feature. I'm not terribly familiar with that.
So a landing assist, we were thinking through how we wanted to work together with pilots. So there are multiple assist type technologies, landing assist being one of them. You got taxi assist, landing assist, and takeoff assist. Landing assist allows the pilot to buy time. So think of the scenario where you have smoke in the cockpit, or you were startled, or you're temporarily incapacitated. It's not a emergency descent mode where you're hypoxic necessarily. You're just confused, startled, whatever it is. You don't want to hand the airplane over to an emergency auto land type system. You just need to buy time. So landing assist allows you to immediately create an automatic flight plan. It immediately engages autopilot and LNAV, VNAV, and it starts you on a plan to a nearby suitable airport. So while the airplane is doing that, you are still able to either decide you want to declare an emergency or squawk 7700 or whatever, but you haven't handed the airplane over to the emergency auto land system. So that will take you all the way down to 200 feet. At which point you disconnect the autopilot and you land. If you needed emergency auto land at any point through that process, you can always do it at that point. But it's really kind of a buy time feature. But we wanted one that was a little below the emergency auto land just so the pilot had a little bit more control. Buy time for the pilot. Landing assist. Takeoff assist is giving you a visible takeoff decision point symbology on the runway. That goes away at 30 to 40 knots. We want that visibility to be there before you even get to the point where you can't, the point of no return, essentially on the takeoff. So that visible takeoff decision point, you'll have a real-time calculation of your gradient for IFR departure, so you know exactly whether you're making your obstacle departure procedure or your diverse vector area kind of requirement. And you also have a takeoff acceleration monitor. So that will let you know whether or not you're adequately accelerating. And all of these things are things that can be applied on an 1,800-foot runway with a Cessna 182. There's no difference between doing that on a Lear 45 or on a Falcon 900 coming out of a 6,000 foot strip as compared to, say, a 182. Taxi Assist is the final one. So Taxi Assist is essentially your Google Maps. So you get a complicated clearance. It gives you a very clear picture in our three-dimensional airport moving map of how that should work.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for describing that. So for people who might be interested in working on some of these cool things like what you're doing at Anthem, tell us about Honeywell's hiring. Are you looking for talented folks, and what kind of backgrounds are you looking for to hire in to do these things?
Absolutely. So having an engineering degree, it doesn't have to be EE, and a pilot background helps a lot. So anything technical where you're able to have solid, efficient conversations with our engineering teams, and you also have that flying background, you'll be ahead of the pack. We're also very focused on human factors. So if anyone out there is looking at a master's degree as an example, you have your engineering degree and you want to go get your master's, look hard at human factors. Even if you're not on the human factors team, understanding how important that is as we develop these new features, as we consider how to put things on the displays, whether we even put something on a display versus having it as an oral or having it as a different type of presentation to the pilots. It's extremely helpful to have that kind of a background. Flight instructors. So somebody who goes beyond just the basic private or the instrument rating, although that's really helpful. If you're able to teach a lot of these things, that also is very, very helpful. And then, of course, any test type background would be good, but that's not completely necessary.
And you're based down in the Phoenix area. Is that where most people are located, or are they also working remotely from home?
No, we are not working from home, but we do have most of our team. Industrial design, I didn't mention that either, Max. If you're an industrial designer, we could use that talent. So our industrial designers are in Sky Harbor, which is down near the Phoenix airport. The human factors team is there in Deer Valley. Our engineering team is primarily in Deer Valley, but we do have other products teams elsewhere throughout the country, primarily Phoenix area.
Well, so as we wrap up here, where do people go to find out more about the Anthem system?
So where they should go is https://aerospace.honeywell.com. So your standard prefix there, aerospace.honeywell.com.
That's great. Jason, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, sir.
And my thanks to Jason Bialek for joining us today. I wanted to mention a couple of things that didn't come up in the conversation. Anthem is not shipping yet, but the first deliveries are expected in 2023. They also expect to make retrofit systems for older aircraft available by 2025. And their launch customers are rather interesting. They include two eVTOL aircraft. One is the VA-X4 from Vertical Aerospace, and the other is the 7-seat Lilium jet. You can learn more about the Anthem system at aerospace.honeywell.com, and I've included a link to that page in our show notes, which you can find at aviationnewstalk.com/209. Now, one of my goals with this show is to bring you interesting newsmakers and talk with them in greater depth than you may find elsewhere. So I hope you learned something interesting today from our chat with Jason. And if you feel that you're getting some value from this show, think about what you might pay for an hour of ground instruction or even for an aviation magazine subscription. And now, if you would, just take the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to sign up to become a member to support this show. It's easy to do. Just go out to aviationnewstalk.com/awesome, which takes you to our Patreon site where you can sign up to donate using a credit card. Everyone who donates gets their name read on the show, and we only had a couple of people sign up this week, and here they are. See if maybe you know them. Michael Smith signed up at the $35 a month level, so he gets access to my online courses as well as to the bonus videos, including the one of this episode, and Ian McCook, who signed up at the $8 a month level. You can also support the show through PayPal, and their system gives you a choice of either donating monthly or making a one-time donation. And to donate via PayPal, go to aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal. And thanks so much for your support. And finally, please tell just one friend today about the Aviation News Talk podcast. And if they don't know what a podcast is, send them out to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, where they can download our dedicated app for free. Just search in the store for Aviation News Talk. So until next time, fly safely, have fun, and keep the blue side up.